Well, someone needed to say it. Unfortunately, it had to be me. And to start off with, by mid, I do mean middling. I'd give the manga somewhere in the range of a 6 out of 10. That's not a bad score. I'd say it's good, actually. It's worth a read, and there are good moments that stand out to me. This opinion, however, has been a gradually shifting one. On first reading, I was pretty enthralled with it. Then I put it down and came back to it and found myself enjoying it less. And finally catching up, I can say that's about where my feelings have leveled. Especially when I'm regularly called a decrepit senile boomer and have to dig my heels in about my opinion. Yep, putting me on the defensive is sure going to change my mind and help me to enjoy a series I'm actively trying not to be completely apathetic towards.
Okay, boomer. Oh yeah, okay, boomer. Okay, boomer. Okay, boomer.
This show is full of fucking autists. It's amazing.
I try to find the value in everything, but while My Hero Academia is a series that does have value, noticing it doesn't particularly give me the deeper sense of appreciation or enjoyment that I hope for. And I don't think it's a fault of the series that it mostly appeals to me on the most basic what happens next level that serves as an artifact of prior emotional investment. There's some characters I think are good, the art is strong even if the anime doesn't really live up to it, that's just how I feel and I don't really expect anyone to agree with me. The kind of issue we see with MHA is that as a new and popular thing, it has people liking it. Then, people who don't care as much for thing engage with it and have less than positive things to say. Some of which is legitimate with the bad amount being couched in misunderstandings of the narrative or just all narratives and storytelling in general. I may not be invested in MHA, but it's at no fault of the series. It's solid and has made no real missteps. The aspects I find not to my notable enjoyment being just that, not to my particular enjoyment, rather than being something bad or faulty, or even making me feel negative. It's stuff that's just there. But the negative criticisms force those who do like it into a defensive position, but one they're not always particularly capable of representing, leading to defenses that are just as wrong-minded as the criticisms they are opposed to. As a result, a lot of the discourse around the series can be divided into overpraise and overhate, people seeing it accomplish basic things and overhyping it, throwing other things under the bus to do so at worst, or making dumb arguments to try and tear it down. The extremes of these you'll see on Twitter and Reddit, but I'm not going to subject myself to the horrors of trying to pick out fringe opinions, or trying to boil dozens of thoughts down into one point I see being made. I'm going to focus on a few moderate ones made by higher profile critics, starting with Giguk's claim that the fights in My Hero Academia are pretty dull. Though the video is titled as negative, it's actually positive and pretty stupid. The ultimate aim of the video is to try and discover what distinguishes MHA from other things in the same genre, going on to state that no, MHA isn't a battle shonen, it's a
well-written superhero character drama. One with an established world and society.
Because the fights aren't actually fights, they're the story. Not that the fights tell a story, but that the main beats of the story is told through the fights. Baffling is a fitting word to describe the video. It very much bends over backwards trying to insist that MHA is doing something different by using its fights to characterize, world build, and deliver ideological conflicts. Which is exactly why it's defined as a battle shonen, not a character drama. A fight for the sake of a fight just shouldn't be in the manga. Conflict is inherently going to offer something, be it for any of those purposes. It's even admitted that the fighting doesn't make them good, it's the context around the fight, which kind of ends up dodging around his own forced complaint. To someone unengaged, the fights having context and meaning to them isn't magically going to make them begin to care. Even if they see the value in what it accomplishes, investment is still very much subjective. Case in point being myself with the Sun Eater fight. Too weighed down by his need to be perfect, he hesitated to move, but Mirio's brightness pushed him further, pushed him to do better. This is contrasted in his enemies, comrades who were taken in by Overhaul because useful trash is being better than disposed of as trash, and in their circumstances they were able to find camaraderie. But as Tamaki said, they could not eat their friends. Unified as trash, they could not rise above one another, or push each other down by harming them. But Tamaki wasn't so beholden to his comrade, one trying to make up for past failures and charging into unknown danger. By aiming to surpass Mirio, he was able to surpass his enemies that gladly accepted their circumstances and remained in that low place with each other. I get the context, there were smarty boy strategy things, and the fight looked pretty good too, and none of this was anything that stopped the fight from being dull to me. Never mind that there's a couple points to the fight that factor into something unfairly dismissed in Giguk's video. The driving conflict of the fight, Tamaki's hero name, and his quirk all focus around eating. These individual elements are part of what makes the fighting worthwhile and not dull by Giguk's standard. Yet in his video he argues that the fights could just be replaced with thumb wrestling, which is so completely off base and laughably dismissive that it makes makes my head spin. There is so much important context being displaced. What, is Tamaki just gonna eat his opponent's thumb? And yeah, it's a joke, but nothing in the video is funny in the first place, and a point is still ultimately trying to be made here. What's not a joke is the claim that the fights don't matter except how they work in the grand scheme of things, which is why fights always mattered. He's trying to make this broad aspect of MHA something it's not. Unique. Bleach is packed with fighting, everyone fleshing out its recurring cast and continually building on its thematic ideas and arcs. Fist of the North Star? Anyone? Yu Yu Hakusho? The rest of the big three? Literally anything! You can read things out of any conflict. In a similar sort of overpraised vein, I'm going to talk about a much less egregious example in the form of Maname Matt's video on Shigaraki. Now, the core of it that sticks to MHA is more or less fine. Shigaraki grows as the story goes on. Neat. But what bothers me here is the framing. The title claims that Shigaraki is revolutionary, even though the video admits that he only might be as the series continues. It should be obviously wrong, as stating that Shigaraki has somehow revolutionized the way that series writes their villains, even though the story is so far from being completed, is utterly ridiculous. But hey, it draws in the clicks and shows that it hasn't been thought about too hard after that. But if we're talking about antagonistic characters who grow, you have Sasuke, who spends much of the series walking forward on his own path, much like Naruto. And if you want to talk about pure villains making changes, then one with a marked change after his failure is Dio Brando. Starting with Phantom Blood, Dio's view of power is rather straightforward. His most notable minions are Jack the Ripper, Killer of Dozens, or Tarkus and Bruford, knights who succeeded in the challenge of 77 rings. Dio himself surrendered his humanity to become a vampire, the strongest known being. And yet all of that was fruitless in response to Jonathan and his indomitable spirit, his will literalized through Hamon. After his defeat, we skip chronologically to flashbacks given during Stone Ocean, where he gives an alternative view of strength, where he notes that everyone has strengths and weaknesses. Even if it is retroactive, this can be seen in the types of minions he utilized throughout Stardust Crusaders. While he used one with capable amounts of brute force like Pet Shop or Anubis, he was also guarded by the likes of the Darby brothers, whose strength was far outside the physical like he relied on in Phantom Blood, Dio's failures having led to introspection and growth. That's not to take away from Shigaraki, as at least among series I've read he's handled uniquely, being the final antagonist where Dio is only antagonist through part of his series, and starting out as an antagonist where Sasuke made the switch partway through. I just feel as though the statement of revolutionary is vastly overselling it, especially when again, the actual video isn't able to make the claim without hedging it. Even though they aren't actively aiming to throw other series under the bus, something worth a whole discussion of in itself, Gigguk and Matt still ultimately eclipse other works in the genre through not acknowledging what they do not know. Matt's video in particular could have stood to be reframed to hold back on that, his overhaul video being a positive step in that it at least never makes claims beyond the context of the show, even though the title is still framed that way. Gigguk's I have no idea how to fix because I'm still not sure what it was trying to accomplish, but at the end of the day I will say that despite lacking the proper framework and framing, they are coming from a positive place. For my last example, I want to talk about a take that I found less than positive, that being IGN's review of Season 4, Episode 9, adapting Kirishima and Fat Gum's fight against Rappa, in which he claims that it borders on filler. Now, to start with being pedantic, filler is a word that generally refers to anime original content, meaning that this material is objectively not filler. Padding might have been a more accurate term, but claiming that the fight does what it sets out to do well enough, while also saying it does nothing to advance the plot we are so desperate to see move forward, leads to a complaint that I feel is misplaced. Not in that it's a wrong thing to feel, but in that it's one that I feel is utterly inadequate in regards to discussing the genre as a whole, not even just MHA, and as a result, creating something of an impossible problem. What this fight is accomplishing is giving much needed context into Kirishima, one of the characters who's been more or less in the background for over 100 chapters and 50 episodes at this point. Class A in general is large, and while some characters have gotten moments here or there, we're still waiting on many of them. And this episode is exactly how the audience is meant to come to care for them. We get context into Kirishima's struggles and hangups about being a hero, tying him to another Class A hero, and ultimately the thematic thrust of both the arc and the series as a whole. Structurally, this is no different than how any shonen series handles its battles, which is why I feel it's unfair as to only focus on the main plot of this single arc, when this fight is one that's considering the role of the character in the story as a whole. To not give him any focus is to beg the question of why he's in the story at all, and to give him focus in an action scene, which is to be expected of an action series, is just the norm. Even if the fight is doing what it aims to accomplish, that's still being ignored in favor of what the article's author wants to see from the series. I think the point being missed here is one that echoes back to the appeal of the genre itself. If you want a tightly focused story on only a small number of key characters, then try something else, like a film or a 12-episode anime, because stories like this are big in cast, big in scale, and big in length, made for the long haul. Part of the appeal is perhaps best stated in Hunter x Hunter, where Jing states that the side trips off of the main road to what you're looking for should be enjoyed. Hunter x Hunter itself is a series that runs with these side detours, away from the main goals of its characters, ending major arcs with some form of anticlimax. Yet it is one of the most well-regarded and beloved in the genre. Like Kirishima took Rappa head-on, I don't think the small things that the author felt were important enough to show should be skipped over or ignored if you enjoy the genre, especially when they aim to contribute to the whole beyond the short-sighted view of the plot. Like or dislike them at their own merits and what they offer, just don't dismiss them because they don't seem to matter when you could aim to find out why they do. Now, talking only about the clumsy takes would be incredibly unfair. With so much discussion, there's no way it could all be poorly handled, and there are definitely videos worth watching that manage to explain and explore the series on its own merits, so I've linked a few in the description. To finally go back to the series itself, what helped me to best understand the state of discourse and why it's like this was actually watching the anime. I skipped straight to season 4, which is actually the lowest rated one at the moment. I myself have been less than engaged overall in spite of a few good episodes here or there, only really watching it for a podcast where I get to say my dumb things here or there and my friends get to gush about how much they enjoy it. But after more or less having to push my way through something I'm largely disengaged with and have little to nothing to say, I can better understand why someone who has saying things as a job will at least try to say something that sounds meaningful. Getting paid to say what happens to be dumb shit is understandably more appealing than not saying anything and not getting paid. YouTube incentivizes mainstream and controversial opinions by rewarding all engagement, likes, dislikes, and comments through their algorithm. And of course, popular outlets need to cover popular things. Dumb things said are still dumb, and I'm lucky enough not to have to force myself too much, but YouTube commenters, Twitter, and Reddit say stupid shit for free. Well, insinuating that I have absolutely nothing to say is a bit disingenuous. I do contribute to the podcast, and those discussions in turn lead to further thoughts of my own. Something Vindy said about Kirishima and his quirk made me begin to consider them as a systemic trait. Quirks will act and react in certain ways, which in turn incentivizes how the people with them must act and react. As a boy who wants to become a hero, Kirishima is kind of a coward, but his powers force him to take things head on, or else he won't be able to protect anything. What seems much more common in stories with powers is characters who already fit them perfectly. Even in MHA, you have Deku the Everyman with his Everyman Brick powerhouse abilities. And well, Bakugo is explosive. Enough said. But Kirishima's personality doesn't fit his powers, and in order to grow into them as a better hero, he needs to change into one as a person. Not just for thematic ones, but also basic textual ones thanks to his quirk. The same concept is also touched upon with characters like Shinzo, who wants to be a hero but has a villain power, meaning he would have to distinguish himself as a hero in a different way than Todoroki or Deku, who are standing under the shadows of heroes with similar powers who they need to surpass. The organic qualities of quirks incentivize certain paths, and the series may continue to explore this idea as it goes forward, never minding what it's already doing that I haven't touched upon here. Even if there may be more to say, and it isn't impossible that my spark for the series might reignite in the future, and I can see potential events in the future that might pique my interest, but that's only a passing likelihood. And while I like to be surprised, one area that the series has consistently failed to surprise me on is the humor. I honestly had to look up any instances that were trying to be funny because none stood out to me. It's just kind of there. No real setups or punchlines. Like, I have to be wrong, but it just feels like every instance is just a goofy thing being done. Or, haha, Mineta is a pervert, isn't that so funny? But even now, as I express something I particularly don't care for in the series, it's just the humor. Something already incredibly subjective in regards to enjoyment, because I have no real objective faults to point out. Stain's a plot device, but I'd argue he's a perfectly serviceable one. Class A is really big, and if you can say all their names off the top of your head, I think you're a liar. But they might get their time in the limelight. Eventually. Maybe, probably, perhaps. It's a serviceable show with better source material. I guess I'm just the kind of guy who will prefer something with lower lows and higher highs than something that's just all around mid. I can't really resent MHA, even if the fanbase ticks me off sometimes, since so many are adamant about saying anything, whether they know what they are talking about or not, but I was there when the big three were going, and while I like them all a lot, they needed to be defended way back then, so I feel the need to do that now. Bleach videos coming later this year, I promise, but MHA is the new thing, and given that new things need to be defended, then it's a good thing that it has people defending it now. Even if maybe it's just that sometimes the discussion is a little tiring. Aw shit, I died. Anyway, I'd like to thank my patrons for their support, such as Moz, Flarbu, Mr. Cynical, Gloogle, Bayanort, Tengoon, Oliver Mort, and Mohammed Akeem. Thank you for watching.